Hey everyone, Jeff with Eat a Squirrel here, and today we'll be showing you how to make delicious pan-fried whole squirrel. This is a delicious and quick recipe that can feed either 1 or 2 people depending on the size of the squirrel. It takes less than 10 minutes to prep and 10 minutes to cook and can be paired with a variety of side dishes or just simply enjoyed on its own. The squirrel you see in this video was caught a couple days ago and I've already skinned and cleaned it. If you haven't skinned or cleaned your squirrel, you'll want to do that first. And luckily, we have a video just for you on our channel that explains in detail how to do that. This particular squirrel has also been sitting in brine for a couple of days, so it is extra tender and I am so excited to cook it. So we'll start with our squirrel. Belly side up with the ribs open, and we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on it. Next, we'll flip it over on its back and do the same thing. Since we're pan frying this squirrel, and squirrel is a very lean meat, we'll need to make some breading for it. To make the breading, we'll take a little bit of flour, and I'm pouring this all into a small bowl. The next ingredient is Famous Dave's rib rub, which is the same ingredient that we use to make our pulled squirrel. Add a little bit in the flour mix. Next, you'll want to add some cayenne pepper, just a little dash, or if you prefer spicy, you can add a little bit more. And we'll also add a little garlic powder because I personally love garlic. And our last ingredient for the flour mix will be a little bit of Italian seasoning. You can substitute basil or oregano if you just want to stick with one herb. Mix the ingredients until you get a uniform mixture, and then we're ready to sprinkle this over the squirrel. For this, I take my fingers and I grab a little bit of flour and sprinkle it over the squirrel. And then I pat it around to distribute it evenly. Now flip the squirrel, rub it a little bit in the excess flour, and you'll repeat again for the underside of the squirrel. Use a liberal amount of breading here because we want to cover the entire squirrel. We don't want any part of the squirrel meat exposed directly to the frying pan, otherwise it'll tense up and become very, very chewy. Alright, so now that our squirrel is fully coated, it's time to fire up the frying pan. For squirrel, I like to use a cast iron pan as it is naturally non-stick and it preserves the flavor of the squirrel really well. We'll turn our heat to medium-high and let it warm up a little bit. Next, you'll want to add a little bit of vegetable oil, just enough to make a thin layer of oil in the pan. Let the oil preheat until it is just above its smoking point. Once the oil begins to smoke, which it is right about now, I'm going to put in my squirrel. And in this recipe, I put in the entire squirrel without chopping it into pieces. I can do this because the squirrel that I'm about to cook is a juvenile, which means it's just big enough to fit in this 10-inch cast iron skillet. As your squirrel is frying, you'll want to pat it down firmly with a spatula. Squirrels are not naturally flat, so you'll need to pat it down to give it some sizzle. So it's been cooking now for about 1.5 minutes on its belly. We're going to flip it and do the same thing with the other side. Remember, you'll want to press down with the spatula to get as much of the squirrel in contact with your frying pan as possible. Now here's the secret to making the squirrel really tender. We'll want to braise the squirrel for just a little bit by adding some chicken broth and covering our frying pan immediately to let the steam cook the rest of the squirrel from the inside out. In the United States, the FDA recommends a minimum internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit for any wild game. That includes squirrels. So be sure to have a cooking thermometer nearby so that you can measure the squirrel every couple of minutes or so. So the squirrel's been cooking for a couple minutes now. I'm going to take my food thermometer and measure it on the thickest parts of the meat, which are the legs and the arm. So I can see that the legs are not quite done yet, but when I measure the arms, they're fairly done, and that's because the arms have less meat. So we're gonna let it cook for a little bit more and add a little more chicken broth to our skillet. And all right, our squirrel is fully cooked. So we'll just flip it one more time and let it sear for about 10 more seconds. And then we will plate the squirrel and have ourselves a delicious dinner. And ladies and gentlemen, there we have it. Pan-fried whole squirrel. There aren't a lot of other wild animals that can be cooked whole, but squirrel is one of them, and it is healthy, organic, sustainable, and delicious. I've paired it here with a side of potato salad, but you can try a variety of other sides. Anything that you would find for a picnic or a barbecue will go really well with a pan-fried squirrel. I wish you guys could all smell this, but that's it for this time. If you liked this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.